Imagine granting a lifetime federal judgeship to a man who flat out refuses to call January 6th an attack. When pressed by Senator Blumenthal, nominee Matthew Schwartz deliberately downgraded the violent insurrection to mere trespass and violence the exact, calculated language used in Trump's pardons. Now, picture this same man, who rehearsed these evasive answers with White House lawyers, holding the power to rule on January 6th prosecutions and civil suits from battered police officers across New York, Connecticut, and Vermont. We are just one Senate vote away from letting a rehearsed partisan rewrite the legal history of our democracy. Watch this.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for your willingness to serve and for being here today. Mr. Flowers, who won the 2020 election?
Senator Blumenthal, I'll incorporate the answer that Justice Jackson gave that Chairman Grassley referred to earlier. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to comment on the outcomes of any election except to say that, legally speaking, Joe Biden was certified.
Justice Jackson said it would be inappropriate for her as a sitting federal judge. You are not a sitting federal judge. Who won the 2020 election?
Senator, it's long been understood that nominees should abide by the same code of ethics that binds sitting judges. So I do think her example is persuasive, and I intend to follow it.
I think your failure to answer that question mocks this committee. And I will just say to you, she declined to answer based on the code of ethics because at the time she was a sitting federal judge. And frankly, I know Justice Jackson. You're no Justice Jackson, and I would ask her the same question and insist on her answering it if she were the nominee today. So I'll give you one more chance. Who won the 2020 election, sir?
I'll again adhere to Justice Jackson's precedent.
Mr. Schwartz, who won the 2020 election?
So, Senator, I think the answer that Justice Jackson gave is the only legally and ethically correct answer.
You recognize that you're not a sitting federal judge.
Senator, the rules for judicial conduct apply to judicial nominees who are not judges as well.
No, they don't, Mr. Schwartz, and you know better. And you are, in fact, fooling or trying to fool this committee and the general public. And you've appeared before a lot of distinguished Second Circuit judges. I'm willing to bet you know they would not answer the question this way. Who won the popular vote, Mr. Schwartz, in the 2020 election?
So, Senator, again, consistent with the answer that Justice Jackson and other prior nominees—
This is a factual question, Mr. Schwartz. It's a matter of public record. You wouldn't answer the question in this way if you were before a judge, would you?
Senator, sitting here as a judicial nominee, I'm bound by the codes of conduct, and I can't answer that question in the way you want me to, because the only legally and ethically correct answer is the one that prior nominees have given, which is that Joe Biden was certified as president in 2020.
Let me ask you, Mr. Flowers, this answer that you've given obviously has been rehearsed. Who did you meet with at the White House before you came here in preparing?
Senator, I did practice moots, I suppose you'd call them, with folks from White House counsel. But
you practiced?
I didn't practice a particular answer. I'm responding to the question you asked.
Well, sounds to me like you practiced. Mr. Schwartz, did you practice as well?
Senator, I did moots with Mr. Flowers and other people, but this answer is the same answer that has been given by Justice Jackson and by prior nominees as well, because again, it's the correct answer legally, and it's the only ethically acceptable answer.
Mr. Schwartz, was the Capitol attacked on January 6th?
Senator, there was definitely trespass and violence at the Capitol on January 6th, and obviously violence against law enforcement or against political actors is unacceptable.
So the Capitol was attacked violently on January 6th, correct?
So again, Senator, you're asking me to weigh in on sort of public characterizations. What I will say is that the Capitol there was trespass and there was violence at the Capitol on January 6th, absolutely.
You know, what makes me angry is not just the insult to the role of this committee, but to our intelligence. Do you really expect us to accept these canned, rehearsed, practiced answers repeated again and again and again by judicial nominees who have an obligation to be truthful, and most important, you have an obligation to be independent. You both know better. You both have records of litigating, and you both would expect more of nominees in your position because, above all, a federal judge must be independent without fear or favor, and your fear, apparently, of Donald Trump, so much so that you practiced with the White House before you came here and rehearsed this answer and are repeating by rote what you've been told to say, in my view, is disqualifying. And I'm really disappointed in both of you because I would have expected better. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a point of personal privilege? Yes. On page 3 of the Canons of Judicial Ethics, makes pretty clear, and it says right here in black and white, the code is designed to provide guidance to judges and nominees for judicial office. Just wanted to make that clear.
I hope my opening statement I meant to make to put an answer or an end to this circus.
You need more than they're trying to clean up for you.
I think that what Justice Jackson said is very clear. Put that chart up again. And what Senator Lee just said was the same point that Justice Jackson was making about the practice before the Supreme Court. So let me read what Jackson said, quote, "It would be inappropriate for me to publicly weigh into any subject of political debate." And I don't know what more I can say to put an end to this issue that brings in a whole lot of hypocrisy and efforts to create sound bites to make qualified people to be on the courts legitimate versus their efforts to make your appointment illegitimate.
Mr. Chairman, in fairness to Justice Jackson, I want to point out that the full quote is, as you've described it, inappropriate to comment, quote, "as a pending judicial nominee and a sitting federal judge." They are not sitting federal judges. And I also want to point out, Mr. Chairman, that Justice Jackson's response was not sitting here. It was in a written response. So putting her picture there with her right hand raised, I think, is a bit misleading. But the fact of the matter is, I will rest my case on what I have said here, and I will be voting against these nominees based on their failure to respond to the American people, not just us.
Senator Arano.
Now, the credentials here matter because they make what just happened so much worse. Benjamin Flowers served as the top government lawyer of Ohio and worked as a personal legal assistant to Justice Antonin Scalia, the justice who spent nearly 30 years on the Supreme Court insisting that text means exactly what it says, facts can't be twisted by politics, and the law is not a menu. Matthew Schwartz twice worked as a personal legal assistant to Justice Samuel Alito and made partner at Sullivan and Cromwell, one of the most elite law firms on the planet. These two men have built their careers on stating documented facts with precision. Think about that. And then they chose this confirmation hearing to stop doing that. But here's the thing. The biggest fact that got lost in that exchange is this. Donald Trump didn't nominate someone who simply shares his worldview. He nominated the lawyer currently representing him in an ongoing criminal court case. Schwartz is part of the legal team handling the president's challenge to his New York State conviction for illegally altering financial documents to conceal a $130,000 payment to adult film actress Stormy Daniels. And when Trump made the announcement on social media in April of 2026, he praised the PIC for, and I'm quoting directly here, fighting fiercely against lawfare and government overreach without mentioning the active case by name. An active client rewarding his active attorney with a lifetime federal judgeship. That's the nomination. Now, the Ketanji Brown Jackson argument both nominees reached for has a flaw that nobody in that hearing actually named. And here's what it is. The official rule book for judges, called the Canon of Judicial Ethics, exists to prevent judges from forming opinions ahead of time on cases they haven't heard yet. That is its entire purpose. It applies when there's an unresolved legal case, a live controversy with no ruling yet. The 2020 election has been challenged in court more than 60 times in federal and state courts. Every single challenge failed on the merits. Congress certified the result. The Electoral College confirmed it. There is no pending case. There's no future court case it could affect. The canon can't protect against prejudgment of a question that's already been decided by courts over and over again. What the nominees did wasn't follow the true purpose of the canon. They used it in a way it was never meant to be used, to hide a proven historical fact it was never designed to protect. And they did it behind the name of a justice most of them would never have voted to confirm, using her as their example for evasions she never made. Let that sink in. And look, the more important question about the White House prep session isn't that it happened. It's that they said so. These are two of the most sophisticated legal minds in the country. One of them won a Supreme Court case. The other navigates the most complex legal cases at America's biggest law firms. Neither man answers a hostile question without knowing exactly where it leads. When Senator Richard Blumenthal pressed them on whether the answers were rehearsed, they didn't deflect, they confirmed. And I want you to think about why. White House coaching of judicial nominees is no longer something the president's branch of government feels any need to conceal. It's now the openly admitted, completely normal standard. The Senate approval process was designed to let the Senate evaluate whether nominees can function independently of the president who appointed them. Both men admitted they had prepped with that president's lawyers and said so without hesitation. That's a sign the whole system is broken, not just an ethics question. And the Senate's complete inability to do anything about it is part of the answer. So here's the context the rest of the media isn't giving you. This hearing didn't happen without context. Since January of 2025, this administration fired nearly 100 immigration judges from the government agency that oversees those courts. By February of 2026, the total active immigration judge workforce had shrunk from 726 positions to 520, a reduction of more than 200 judges in 13 months. And multiple judges who resigned cited the exact same reason. They no longer had, in their own words, judicial independence to conduct their courtroom and make decisions under the law. Every nominee in this administration understood the lesson. Every single one. Step back now and look at the full scope of what's already happened. As of the 22nd of May 2026, this second term alone had produced 39 confirmed lifetime federal judges, according to the official U.S. Courts Confirmation Tracking Database. Add that to the 234 from the first term, and the total number of lifetime federal judges appointed across both terms now exceeds 270. And among those first 34 second-term confirmations tracked through mid-March of 2026, 94% were white, according to a neutral organization that tracks judicial nominations. These are lifetime appointments. The judges confirmed this week will still be on the bench when today's law students are retiring. So when Blumenthal expressed his frustration, understand that it wasn't about two nominees. It was about a machine running at full speed. Now, one word from that hearing deserves a much closer look. Trespass. That's how the nominee described January 6th. Trespass and violent. And here's why that word choice matters beyond this one exchange. Trespass is among the lightest charges that came out of that day. It describes the minimum level of criminal contact with a restricted space, and hundreds of defendants who admitted guilt to the lightest charges admitted to exactly that charge. But that vocabulary, bare, cold, with all moral meaning removed, is also the exact language used in the official pardon order. The proclamation described those defendants as people convicted of offenses related to events at the Capitol, trespass and events. The same frame. And look, he's going to write court rulings. Words like trespass and attack and insurrection carry completely different legal weight in a court ruling. They shape what punishments apply, what money is owed, what rules are followed. He already showed you the vocabulary he'll use when a January 6th case comes before him. Then consider what the president did with the people who committed those acts, because this is where the dots really connect. On the 20th of January 2025, hours after taking his second oath of office, he signed Proclamation 10887, granting legal forgiveness to those convicted of offenses related to the January 6th events. The order worked in two separate steps. It shortened the prison sentences of 14 named leaders of the Oath Keepers and Proud Boys, convicted of plotting to violently overthrow the government, to time served, and it issued complete, no strings attached pardons to all other individuals convicted of offenses related to January 6th. He called those defendants hostages. So here's what that means. The president who erased that assault from the official record with the stroke of a pen is now seating judges who won't confirm on the record that it was an attack. And I want you to remember that the next time someone tells you these are separate stories, and look, this evasion isn't the product of individual legal caution. The senator who questioned them has argued publicly that it follows a deliberate, organized plan, documenting in a March 27, 2026 statement that his nominees had been delivering scripted non-answers on January 6th and the 2020 election as a consistent practice throughout this session of Congress. Legal experts tracking the nominations told the 19th News that nominees who evade these questions raise direct concerns about whether judges can stay independent. So let's be clear about what that answer was. It didn't come from personal principle. It came from a White House prep session. Now, that nomination to the Federal Appeals Court covering New York carries a conflict of interest that goes beyond political beliefs or party loyalty. The nominee's firm, Sullivan and Cromwell, remains the president's legal team in the state court appeal over the hush money case. He promised to remove himself from any cases involving the president, but then admitted he doesn't know how much the president owes the firm in unpaid legal fees. That is a thing that actually happened. Democratic Senator Cory Booker pressed him on this point after the president's Save America political fund reported a nearly $400,000 debt to Sullivan and Cromwell as of April. If confirmed, he'd be ruling alongside colleagues handling the full range of cases tied to the White House coming out of New York, with a financial relationship to the president's legal team he can't even put a number on. Think about that. And then there's Flowers. His biggest achievement, the fight he's known for, is the case he successfully argued against Biden's federal workplace vaccine requirement for large employers, which he took all the way to the nation's highest court and won on documented facts and legal precision. When asked to acknowledge a certified election result on the public record, he refused. He chose exactly which battles require his courage, and the contrast between those two choices tells you everything you need to know about why he made this one. And if you think this is just a domestic political story, it isn't. In January of 2026, a group of roughly 40 international lawyer organizations chose the U.S. as the focus country for the International Day of the Endangered Lawyer, an annual recognition that has previously spotlighted Belarus, Afghanistan, and Iran. We've seen this movie before, but never with America in the starring role. The selection cited official presidential orders targeting law firms, harassment, political retaliation, and what the coalition called discriminatory measures undermining the independence of the legal profession. And separately, the United Nations official independent expert on the independence of judges and lawyers, Margaret Satwaite, expressed grave concern that the president's branch of government and its allies have engaged in labeling, denigration, and calls for impeachment of judges who have ruled against the executive, and warned that targeting legal professionals for their work poses a direct threat to the integrity and fairness of legal proceedings in the United States. That is the formal assessment of a United Nations expert about the United States of America in 2026. So, Senator Mike Lee read from page 3 of the canons. But here's the thing about that canon language. Subject of political debate. It was written by people who assumed that phrase covered contested policy questions with real legal uncertainty, immigration law, executive authority, regulatory power. Nobody writing that rulebook ever imagined nominees reaching for it to avoid confirming the outcome of a presidential election that was certified, challenged in court more than 60 times, and confirmed by Congress. And that logic has no stopping point. None. A future nominee could refuse to confirm that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is enforceable on the grounds that its scope is a subject of political debate. They could decline to affirm that Brown versus Board of Education is settled, established law. Any proven fact one political side chooses to argue against becomes, under this logic, off limits. And then Grassley displayed a photograph of Jackson, the first black woman confirmed to the Supreme Court, as a defense for nominees who wouldn't confirm the outcome of the election that made her confirmation possible. Could there be a more revealing moment in that entire hearing? The canon was designed to protect judicial fairness. That is what it has become. A tool to protect nominees from accountability to the public they'll be judging. So let me tell you what happens next, because this is the part that doesn't end when the hearing ends. One of them will sit on the federal appeals court covering Ohio, Michigan, Kentucky, and Tennessee. Criminal cases, workers' rights, election lawsuits, and abortion restrictions all go through Cincinnati. The other will sit on the federal appeals court covering New York, Connecticut, and Vermont, with a caseload that includes rules about banking and money, immigration, civil rights, and yes, the ongoing legal fallout from the president, whose personal attorney he currently is. That hearing was an audition, and the men who couldn't confirm a certified election result passed it. Consider the imbalance of that exchange. The senator had one 5-minute round and no power to compel a truthful answer. The nominees had lifetime tenure waiting on the other side of a committee vote. The body designed to decide whether they were fit for the job had no real power to force them to answer. That imbalance, a senator with questions and nominees with nothing to lose, is the real story of what it looks like when judges can no longer act freely from political pressure in 2026. I want you to remember that question, because it will never be asked again under oath, but its answer will show up year after year in the opinions those judges write in courts that cover roughly 60 million Americans who never got to weigh in on how it was answered. Thanks for watching, and I appreciate everyone who supports the channel. Share your thoughts in the comments and let me know where you stand on this issue. Hit the like button if you enjoyed the video or found it useful, click the bell icon so you do not miss any future political updates, and subscribe for more honest takes, news breakdowns, and political discussions. Thanks again for being here, and I will catch you guys in the next one.